A man cuts his murdered concubine's body into 12 pieces and sends one to each tribe of Israel. That's how you call the meeting in ancient Israel. No king, no capital, no government, just a dismembered corpse as a group text. The book of Judges ends with this horror, then delivers its verdict. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This is the Bible making a political argument. To understand how Israel got to this point, we need to understand what a judge actually was. The word is misleading. These were not robe figures in courtrooms. They were charismatic military leaders, meaning their authority came from personal divine empowerment, not from office or heredity. God's Spirit seized them for a specific crisis, a battle, an invasion, and then they faded away. No dynasty, no bureaucracy, no standing army. And the system was improvised by design. Look at the range. Deborah was a woman who held court under a palm tree, the only judge who actually judged. Ehud was a left-handed assassin who smuggled a dagger past security. Jephthah was a bandit, an outlaw recruited in desperation. Samson was a strong man who chased Philistine women. These are trickster figures, a literary type where the hero succeeds through cunning, deception, or sheer unlikely qualities rather than straightforward virtue. Gideon was explicitly chosen for his weakness. God was the permanent king. Human leaders were temporary, disposable instruments. So the system was improvised by design. But did it work? The book gives us a pattern, and it's not a reassuring one. The Deuteronomistic cycle structures the entire book. Israel sins. God sends an oppressor. Israel cries out. God raises a judge who delivers them. Peace follows. The judge dies. Israel sins again. This cycle works, sort of, for a while. But the judges get progressively worse. Othniel at the top is a straightforward military hero. Deborah is effective, but has to shame her general into fighting. Gideon wins, but then builds an idol. Jephthah sacrifices his own daughter. Samson accomplishes almost nothing for Israel and dies pulling a building down on himself. The cycle is a downward spiral, not a stable loop. At the very bottom, the spiral breaks entirely. Chapters 17 through 21 have no judge at all, just religious corruption, social collapse, and civil war. The system hasn't just failed to improve, it has consumed itself. This wasn't the golden age of freedom before the corruption of kings. The text presents it as a descent into chaos. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because the book of Judges doesn't just describe this failure, it argues about it with itself. The text contains two competing political theologies woven into one book. Voice 1, monarchy is dangerous. After Gideon's great victory over the Midianites, the people offer him the crown. His response is the purest statement of theocratic idealism in the Bible. Theocracy meaning government by God. Gideon says, I shall not rule over you, nor shall my sons rule over you. Yahweh shall rule over you. Case closed, except it isn't. Gideon's son, Abimelech, whose very name means my father is king, so much for refusing the crown, murders his 70 brothers and seizes power by force. His reign is a bloodbath. It ends with a woman dropping a millstone on his head from a tower wall. Before Abimelech, there's Jotham's fable. The trees seek a king, and only the worthless thorn bush accepts. The message seems unmistakable. Kingship attracts the worst and destroys the rest. So the stories say monarchy is dangerous, but the narrator has a very different take. The editor who assembled these stories into a book, scholars call this the Deuteronomistic historian, keeps inserting a devastating refrain across chapters 17 through 21. In those days, there was no king in Israel. It appears 4 times, and each time, conditions are worse. The narrator is making the opposite argument from Gideon. The absence of a king is the problem, not kingship itself, but the vacuum of authority. 2 voices, 2 political theologies, 1 book. Track the escalation. Chapter 17, verse 6. No king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. The episode: a man named Micah builds a private idol and hires his own priest. Religious corruption. Chapter 18, verse 1. No king in Israel. The tribe of Dan steals Micah's idol and the priest at sword point, then conquers a peaceful city. Tribal lawlessness. Chapter 19, verse 1. No king in Israel. A Levite's concubine is gang raped and murdered by Israelites at Gibeah. Social and moral collapse. Chapter 21, verse 25. The full refrain returns. No king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Civil war against Benjamin. Near extermination of an entire tribe. A kidnapping of women. A total systemic failure. The phrase "no king" may carry a double meaning, the absence of both a human king and faithful acknowledgement of God as king. All of this comes to a head in the book's horrifying finale. The Levite sends pieces of his concubine's body to all 12 tribes. For the first time in the entire book, every tribe responds. They muster an army. They act as one nation, and what do they do with this unprecedented unity? They wage war against Benjamin, one of their own tribes. They nearly wipe Benjamin off the map. Then, realizing they've almost destroyed a piece of Israel, their solution is to kidnap young women from Shiloh to provide wives for the surviving Benjaminite men. The one time all 12 tribes unite and act collectively, the one time, it produces only destruction. The system designed to protect Israel has turned Israel into its own worst enemy. And that's the argument. The book has made its case, not through theology alone, but through narrative. The tribal system cannot produce collective action for anything constructive. It can only produce collective action for annihilation. The demand for a king in 1 Samuel is the inevitable result, but the tension never fully resolves. Theocracy, as implemented through ad hoc judges, failed. Not because the ideal was wrong, but because the institution couldn't deliver stable governance or moral order. Even after Israel gets kings, the prophets will keep asking whether any human ruler can truly represent God's authority. The question Judges raises is still open.